You ever scroll through your feed and notice those friends who are, well, they're just kinda there. You know they're on social media, but you never see any pictures of them. No selfies, no vacation pics, nothing. In a world that seems to be all about getting noticed, these people are practically invisible. But what if that invisibility isn't a weakness at all? What if it's actually a superpower? Let's get into it.
It's a really good question, right? We all know somebody like this, and it feels like a real puzzle in our super connected digital lives. Are they hiding something? Are they just painfully shy? Well, the real psychological reason is way more interesting than you'd probably guess.
Okay, so here's where it gets fascinating. The common assumption, our gut reaction, is that people who don't post must be shy, maybe a little antisocial, or, let's be honest, kind of uninteresting. But the psychological reality? It completely flips that on its head. We're often looking at people who are incredibly secure, deeply self-aware, and really emotionally intelligent.
So, how in the world do we get from shy and uninteresting all the way over to secure and self-aware? Let's unpack the real story behind this online ghost and get into the psychology that drives this kind of quiet confidence.
And this, right here, is the key shift in how we need to think about it. This whole thing isn't about lacking social skills or missing some confidence gene. Nope, it's about possessing a powerful set of internal strengths that just make all that external validation from social media, well, less necessary.
So what are these strengths? You can think of them as the architecture of inner security. It all boils down to three foundational pillars that create a really strong sense of self-validation.
And here are those three pillars. First, they really prioritize their privacy. Second, they have a strong sense of self-awareness. And third, they have a genuinely secure self-esteem. Let's start with privacy. Psychologists have found that people who don't post much tend to have what's called a high privacy orientation. They're not being antisocial, they're being self-protective. They just don't need to broadcast their entire life to feel good about it because they rely on self-validation, not likes and shares.
And that self-validation, it's built on that second pillar, strong self-awareness. These folks have a really stable sense of who they are. They know what they value, they know what their goals are, and they know what truly makes them happy. And because that happiness is an inside job, they just don't feel that pull for the constant stream of approval that social media offers.
You know, this isn't just a vague idea. There's a psychological term for it, self-concept clarity. It's basically a measure of how clearly and confidently you define your own beliefs about yourself. When that clarity is high, you're just not as easily swayed by the latest trend or the need to perform for an online audience.
And all of this brings us to that third pillar, secure self-esteem. Now, this isn't arrogance or thinking you're better than everyone. It's a quiet confidence that just doesn't need a spotlight to survive. People with this kind of solid emotional footing tend to be less anxious and less desperate for approval, and that frees up so much energy to focus on their actual real-world goals.
Okay, so we've talked about their strong internal foundation, but that's really only half the story. That inner strength actually changes the way they see the online world itself.
And this different perception is shaped by two final traits. First, they're often what you'd call deep, introspective thinkers. And second, they have a crystal clear understanding of the digital illusion that social media can so easily create. So being a deep thinker here means they really prefer authentic, meaningful conversations over just superficial chatter. They think before they speak, or in this case, post, and they only share when something genuine.
And believe it or not, there's a term for this too. It's called an internal locus of evaluation. It's basically the trait of judging yourself by your own internal rulebook, by your own standards, instead of outsourcing that job to the ever-changing opinions of others online. It's an incredibly powerful
And
way
that
to
leads us straight to the final and maybe most important point. They get that so much of social media is a performance. And because they see the distorted reality it presents, they make a very conscious choice. They choose their own inner peace over putting on a public performance. I saw this quote that just absolutely nails the problem. Social media isn't real life. It's a curated collection of everyone else's best moments. They're highlight reels. And trying to measure your own messy, everyday reality against those perfect, polished moments, well, that's just a recipe for feeling bad about
This is
yourself.
actually explained perfectly by something called social comparison theory. It's the idea that we are literally wired to figure out our own worth by seeing how we stack up against others. So people who stay low-key online are often, without even thinking about it, protecting their own mental health from that endless and honestly damaging cycle of comparison.
When we put all these different pieces of the puzzle together, a totally new and much clearer picture starts to form. We can really begin to understand the quiet confidence that comes from being unseen and the true power of finding your self-worth from the inside.
So let's just recap the journey we've been on. We went from that common, surface-level view to a much deeper psychological one. What we used to see as shy or antisocial, we can now see as a high value placed on privacy. What we might have assumed was uninteresting, we now recognize as an introspective, deep thinker. And what we perceived as a lack of confidence is actually a profound emotional security.
And this right here, this is really the core of it all.
True confidence isn't about how many people see you, it's about how you see yourself. These individuals feel seen and validated by the people who actually matter in their real, day-to-day lives. They simply don't need a digital audience to feel whole.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over. In a culture that is constantly screaming at us to be visible, to be seen, this quiet approach offers a pretty powerful alternative. It kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what does real, unshakable confidence truly look like for me?